Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Jacob Matson. I was the project manager of this team. Our team was called Team Awesome, and we are producing the Gordon Imports newsletter. The destination or the purpose of the program was to allow the one of the coworkers of the company was sending out emails of the newsletter. And because if you send out too many at one time, it comes over as spam. So she was having to do it in batches. This was taking up too much work. So our goal was to make it so that she didn't have to do that and save her some time. Now, the app ran into a problem where we couldn't get the Google credentials. I'll go over that in just a bit, and where I did everything, every suggestion I could find or that we could find, and it is not, it just wasn't working. I was able to accomplish that. So I'll get to that in a sec. In order to, because the app isn't quite working yet, I'm going to go over the code. That's the best I can do. And so we have been able to import all of the Google Sheets information. The app design was that it was going to have a receive and a send button. The receive would gather the names and the phone numbers and a small message of all those contacts in the Google Sheet. And the client would have the Google Sheet and be able to add and delete any contacts necessary as they wish. Once you click the receive button, it's supposed to go through and grab the names and the phone numbers for the Google Sheet, display them here. Then you have the send button, which sends a text message. The message again is in the Google Sheet, and this is pulling from that field. And it is also providing a link to a page that directs them to their newsletter. Because the newsletter changes at least once a week, we couldn't provide enough sufficient way to change the URL as often as we wanted, or we didn't have time to include a feature to update the URL here, which would have been appropriate. Instead, the link directs them to a Google Doc, which contains an updated weekly URL to the Gordon's Imports newsletter. The problem I ran into, and we'll go ahead to go with the code, we appropriately have our key, our user key, or the Google Sheets key is right here. And this is the URL. If you were to copy this URL and send it over, you would get an error saying there's no credentials or you don't have permissions, okay? So after we've set it up so that we are appropriately calling, so you can see here, let me see if I can increase the screen here. You can see here that this is obtaining all of the information from Android to the Google Sheets. Everything is run appropriately. However, when you hit that submit button, that receive button, you now get this global unauthorized error, unauthorization, invalid credentials. So I have done whatever I could to the credentials. I followed every website that the teacher, the tutors, or anyone on StackFlow told me to follow. I followed their instructions. Nothing worked. It still would say invalid credentials. In the receive, let's go ahead and jump in there for a sec. Okay, so here's all of my imports. So now this one caused a little bit of problem, but then we were able to solve that one just fine. So that took a while to figure out. The program begins by asking for a name, setting a string name and phone number, text message and phone number that we will be obtaining from the Google Sheet. And this file right here, this public void test, I just didn't bother changing it from test to something more legit and corresponding. We were able to get the key. We asked for the cells. So currently this is what the cells in. As we grow, we would change this. Eventually we'd just change it to the entire sheet, but just for testing purposes. We wanted to see if we can obtain A2 through C3. And then we would go here to our new access token for the 2auth required for the Google credentials. And that key works. It says it works online. However, it does not work asking for or pinging for the when we use the app. And then we return all of the information on the credentials back to our build. So then what it's supposed to do is bring that information. Now, send file isn't updated with this information just because we have not yet been able to actually get through the credential part and obtain the data on the Google Sheets. So currently we were testing this to where we put in a phone number where we're going to text it to. Eric would plug it into his computer and run it from his computer instead of the emulator, and he would push the resend button and it would send text to the phone. We've tested this 3 times as well with the client, and everything worked great. So as soon as we had the credentials, got through that credentials and obtained the information, we would change these to be grabbing from that list of the phone numbers and the names and the message. So send and send activity has been working properly and ready to go as soon as we can get through those credentials. But obviously, we weren't able to get that part. I spent about 9 hours between 2 weeks trying to figure it out and get it through. I've asked for professional opinions. I got a neighbor or a ward member that was able to get on with me and look with me for about 3.5 hours, and we still couldn't figure it out. So I had to pass it on to my teammates to try and figure it out, have a fresh mind and fresh eyes, as I was getting quite frustrated with that part. But in the end, we are incredibly close. You'll be able to see and pause your screens while we're just recording and see that we are writing our code well, and we should have the results if it weren't for that little hiccup. And so that's my presentation. And I thank you for your time and for watching this.